Have you ever looked back on something from the past and let out a quiet sigh? If only. Maybe it was a rash decision, a harsh word that hurt someone, or a wrong turn you took that still weighs on your heart today. If so, you're not alone. Because in that very moment when your chest tightens just a little, that's when the voice of remorse begins to speak. You see, regret isn't just a sad feeling. It's actually a sign that you're stepping into the deeper layers of moral awareness. What's interesting is, the more mindful and self-aware we become, the more clearly we start to see even the subtlest mistakes, the tiny, often overlooked moments we used to brush off. And you don't have to be a monk to experience this. Anyone, just an ordinary person who's willing to honestly reflect on themselves, will eventually notice, I see now. I was wrong back then. Even if the mistake was small, the heart feels it. But here's where many people misunderstand regret. They think it's just a weak form of self-punishment. It's not. In Buddhism, remorse doesn't paralyze you. In fact, it's considered a noble sadness, like a pure stream of water, quietly cleansing the unwholesome traces left in the heart. That's why someone who truly feels remorse is already taking their first steps on the path of ethics. And only those with humility have the courage to admit their wrongs. So then, why is remorse considered the foundation of wisdom? Why do certain kinds of sorrow actually lead us to freedom and clarity? And if you've ever carried a moral wound, is there a way to somehow make it right again? That's what we'll be exploring in today's video, to understand why remorse isn't a burden to run from, but a quiet turning point, one that deserves our deepest respect on the journey toward an ethical, awakened life. 1. Remorse and the root of humility. People often confuse weakness with the ability to feel remorse, but really, they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. A weak person gives up when life gets hard. But a person who truly feels remorse, that's someone with depth. Because to admit you're wrong takes courage, and to see your own mistake requires a heart big enough not to shrink in pride. In today's world, we see confidence everywhere, sometimes even arrogance. We're taught to stand our ground, to never back down. But if someone clings too tightly to their ego, if they've never once admitted they were wrong, it's likely they've fallen into a quiet kind of pride without even realizing it. There's something people often miss. You can't be remorseful and arrogant at the same time. Those two states can't exist together in a mature, awake mind. Why? Because remorse is the first light of morality, and pride is the quiet shadow that eats away at kindness. When someone honestly faces their own mistake, they're stepping out of the ego's comfort zone. They're not making excuses. They're not trying to be right. They simply pause and say, I was wrong. And from that honesty, a kind of sadness is born. But it's a beautiful sadness. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha once said, "The fool sees not his own faults as an enemy, but the wise one sees his own faults like gold hidden in rock." That's wisdom, that's virtue, and it doesn't come from books, it comes from looking deeply within. Think back. Can you recall a time when someone sincerely apologized to you? They didn't blame anyone. They didn't try to explain it away. They just said, "I'm sorry, I was wrong." In that moment, even if you were hurt, didn't your heart soften? Remorse has the power to transform, not through words, but through the quiet humility that radiates from the heart. That's something no fake apology can ever replicate. That's why someone who can truly feel remorse is someone with a moral heart. And someone who is genuinely moral is always humble. Pride, on the other hand, blocks every opportunity to grow. It convinces us we're always right. And when we believe we're always right, even when we're wrong, we won't admit it. A middle-aged Buddhist once shared, I've been working for years and always thought of myself as a good, ethical person. But after listening to a talk about remorse, I suddenly realized I still had a lot of excuses inside me. I had never truly owned up to my mistakes. That kind of honesty is rare, because most of us, even those who try to live kindly, still want to protect the image of ourselves we show to the world. That's why we often explain instead of admit. But true morality doesn't begin with how others see us. It begins with how honest we are with our own heart. There's an old Buddhist story about a monk who, before becoming ordained, had once lived a layperson's life. At one point, at his parents' request, he left the monastery and returned home, started a family, and had a child. Later, he returned to monastic life. But deep down, guilt still lingered. No one blamed him. No one even knew. But he couldn't forgive himself. The Buddha, aware of this, came to comfort him. He offered teachings that helped the monk see his actions clearly, let go of the shame, and continue his practice. That monk eventually became an arahant, fully awakened. That story shows us something profound. It's not just the mistake that matters. It's our attitude toward the mistake that shapes our transformation. The more we hide our wrongs, the deeper we fall into stubbornness and pride. But someone who dares to face their mistakes, even if they start off fragile, can eventually become deeply strong. Sometimes, regret doesn't need to be spoken aloud. It happens silently in the heart. But if that silence is sincere, it can quietly change the way we live, the way we treat others, the way we walk this path. And from that moment, humility begins to grow. A humble person doesn't rush to judge others because they've seen their own flaws. A humble person doesn't brag about their goodness because they know they've been wrong before. And a humble person is someone in whom morality quietly shines not through speeches or appearances, but through simple presence. In a world where everyone wants to stand out, to be right, to win, someone who can bow their head and say, "I'm sorry," is like a rare flower blooming in the desert of arrogance. That's a person worthy of respect, someone who may have done wrong once, but is walking the right path now. And as the Buddha taught, no one in this world is without fault, but the one who corrects their fault is truly noble. Remorse is the first step to correction, and also the first step toward humility. Because you cannot be both remorseful and arrogant. Someday, you'll look back on something you once did and feel a quiet ache in your chest. And if you have the courage to say, "I wish I hadn't done that," then congratulations, you're growing. You've stopped living from pride. You've started living from awareness. And that is the first doorway back to morality, back to your true heart. 2. Remorse, a noble form of meditation. There's a kind of meditation that doesn't require you to sit cross-legged. You don't need to control your breath. You don't need a quiet room, a meditation cushion, or the scent of sandalwood in the air. All you need is a heart that aches because it knows it's done something wrong. Sometimes meditation doesn't begin in stillness. It begins with a small tremor inside, a quiet shake in the soul, just enough to wake up the part of you that's been asleep, or maybe avoiding the truth for years. And strangely enough, if we don't push that tremor away, don't hide it, don't brush it off, that very feeling becomes the doorway into true inner stillness. That's when remorse becomes a spiritual practice. It might sound paradoxical, right? How could something as negative as remorse be called meditation? But if we understand meditation as the journey inward, as the process of seeing clearly how our mind operates, then tell me, what pulls us inward more powerfully than sincere remorse? Remorse isn't about punishing yourself. It's not about shame or self-loathing. True remorse is simply the moment your heart recognizes it has strayed and no longer wants to walk that path again. It's a kind of inner cleansing. The Buddha once taught, if someone recognizes they've done wrong and sincerely resolves not to repeat it, they are like the sky after the rain. The sun can shine there again. The rain is remorse. Without it, the soil of our heart stays dry, hardened, closed off. But with those first drops, the seeds of goodness begin to grow. There's an old Buddhist story about a thief who made his living stealing from others. One night, he snuck into a monastery, hoping to take something valuable. But as he opened a cabinet, he saw a monk sitting silently in meditation, face calm, as if completely unaware. The thief's hands trembled. Still, he took what he came for. As he turned to leave, the monk quietly said, "I've already given it to you. Just don't forget to say thank you." That one sentence pierced the thief like a sword. No one yelled at him. No one punished him. But something deep inside collapsed. He felt so small in the presence of such immense compassion. From that night on, he never stole again. And later, he returned to that very monastery, asking to become a monk. Stories like that aren't uncommon in Buddhist texts, because Buddhism has never been a religion of punishment. It's a path of transformation. And remorse is often the very first step. If someone can hold their remorse quietly without pushing it away, without drowning it in distractions, without blaming others to escape the weight, then even if they've never meditated a single day in their life, their mind is already entering deep introspection. It's like a silent stream flowing beneath the ground, invisible, yet softening the driest places within. Remorse, if held correctly, gently softens the hardened corners of our heart. And that is meditation. Meditation is not just technique. It's a way of being. There are people who meditate 30 minutes a day every day, yet still snap easily, judge quickly, or hurt others thoughtlessly because they've never truly seen their own faults. And then there are those who've never called themselves meditators, who don't know the words or rituals, but when they remember something they did wrong, their eyes fill with tears, and from that moment forward, they live more gently, more kindly. So, who's really meditating deeper? The answer is probably clear by now. There's a Zen master who once said, "Hold your remorse like a bowl of cleansing water. It may not taste sweet, but it can wash away the stains from your soul." People often fear remorse. They fear it will make them sad, or weak, or confused. But here's the truth. When we stop running from it, when we sit with it, listen to it, let it rise, it begins to settle. And what settles with it is the ego. There's no meditation deeper than sitting quietly with your own mistake without trying to escape. There's no light warmer than the one that comes when remorse turns into humility. And there's no path closer to liberation than the one walked by someone who knows they once strayed and now chooses not to stray again. Remorse, when held with awareness, becomes a friend to meditation. In that space, each time we recall a past mistake, instead of feeling crushed, we might quietly whisper to our heart, "Thank you, old mistake. Because of you, I now live with more care." In Buddhism, no one is ever too late to return. There's only the person who hasn't stopped long enough to truly turn around. Remorse is that first stop. Quiet, small, but powerful enough to change the course of a life. And if we can hold it not let it become guilt, but instead let it light the path ahead, then that is meditation. A form of meditation unseen by the world, but revered by the heavens. And maybe, someday, in this busy life of ours, there will be a moment, a child's gaze, a stranger's words, a strange dream about the past, something that causes you to pause. And when that pause brings a little ache in your heart, don't push it away too quickly. That may be a doorway. And behind that door, a meditation practice not shaped by posture but by a heart, waking up. 3. True wisdom begins when we recognize our mistakes. In a small rural village in ancient India, there once lived a well-respected elder known far and wide for his vast knowledge. People called him the living library. From the Vedas to traditional medicine, astronomy to law, he seemed to know everything. Whenever a dispute broke out in the village, he was the one they called to settle it. Everyone believed, if you want to be wise, be like him, know a lot, remember a lot, speak well. One evening, a wandering monk stopped by the village and asked for a place to stay. That night, he sat quietly while the elder proudly spoke at length about all the things he had studied and mastered. The monk smiled gently and asked a single question. You know many things about the world outside, but have you ever truly looked into the world inside your own mind? The room fell silent. There was no quick answer, and the elder, once full of pride, paused. He had never thought of that. He knew so much, but he had never really looked within. And that right there is the blind spot most of us share. Even in today's world, we get caught up in external knowledge, self-help books, TED Talks, online courses, productivity hacks. They're everywhere, and there's nothing wrong with learning. But if we keep collecting information without ever reflecting on ourselves, then what we're gathering isn't wisdom, it's just data. The Buddha once said, even if you recite 1,000 verses, if you don't live them, it's worth less than a single step taken with awareness, recognizing your faults and correcting them. In the Buddhist path, wisdom doesn't begin with intellectual knowledge. It begins with humility. And only a truly humble heart can recognize its own mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes are small. Just a glance without compassion. Just a flash of anger that never turned into words. Just a moment of indifference towards someone else's pain. A mindful person sees all of this the moment it arises. That's why they're often the ones who feel remorse quickly, but they're also the ones who transform quickly. In the early stages of spiritual practice, people usually notice the obvious wrongs, lying, hurting others, selfishness, greed. But as someone walks deeper on the path, they begin to notice the subtler layers, the pride hidden behind kindness, the ego quietly clinging while offering help, the silent comparison when someone else also does good. These aren't things people call you out for. They're not mistakes others even notice. Only someone truly awake can recognize them. And that capacity to see even the most subtle mistakes, that's the mark of real inner wisdom. You don't need to be a monk to see your own flaws. You don't need to go live in the mountains or meditate in silence for months. Sometimes, all it takes is slowing down and having the courage to look deeply at every thought, every emotion that passes through you. And when you do, wisdom begins to unfold gently, slowly. It might show up in something that seems so ordinary. One afternoon, you snap at your child, not because they did anything wrong, but because you were exhausted. One day, you brush off a friend who needed to talk just because you were busy. One night, you say something sharp to someone you love, then go to sleep without thinking twice. And then one day, maybe a week later, maybe a year, you suddenly remember it, and something inside you tightens. No one blamed you. No one even remembers. But you. You feel it in your heart. That wasn't my best moment. That is the beginning of wisdom. Wisdom doesn't come from achievement or reputation. Wisdom begins the moment you stop and realize you've taken a wrong step. No one is born perfect, but a wise person is someone who refuses to keep repeating the same mistake. There was once an old monk who said, "If each day you take a moment to look into your heart and see even a single place where you're not whole, then that day has been well lived." That quote isn't about beating yourself up. It's a reminder that wisdom isn't a destination. Wisdom is a lifelong journey walked with humble feet and eyes that dare to look inward. So, no matter who you are, a teacher, a parent, an engineer, a small business owner, you can live with wisdom if each day you're willing to ask yourself, "Today, was there something I did that didn't align with my better self?" And if the answer is yes, don't feel discouraged. Because that means you're growing. You're not living from a place of ego. You're living from awareness. And that is how real wisdom begins. 4. Regret helps cleanse our karma. During a Dharma talk at an old monastery in South India, someone asked the meditation master, "Master, if karma is the inevitable result of our past actions, then what's the point of regret? Can it really change anything, or is it too late?" The master looked at him with kind eyes and responded with a beautiful image. When you drop a stone into water, the ripples spread. But if you gently place a leaf on the surface, the waves are still there but softer. Regret is that leaf. In life, all of us, at some point, have hurt someone unintentionally, said something we shouldn't have, or acted in ways we later deeply regret. And usually, when those memories come back, we feel one thing: pain. Pain because we weren't as kind as we thought. Pain because maybe we were the reason someone cried. Pain because we acted out of unwholesomeness. But what's truly frightening isn't the mistake itself, it's that no one ever taught us how to cleanse it. That's why regret, when used the right way, becomes a powerful spiritual practice. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha once taught, when a person sees their wrongdoing, feels shame and remorse, and chooses to change, merit arises, and the heaviness of karma is lightened. That phrase, "the heaviness of karma is lightened," might sound mystical, but it's actually very down to earth. Karma, at its simplest, is the energy, the habit, the mental momentum we create through our thoughts, speech, and actions. And when true regret arises, not the kind that's self-punishing, but a deep and honest sorrow from within that stream of unwholesome energy begins to dissolve. It's like a muddy river after a storm. If we stop stirring it, the water will settle. Regret is the stopping. It's when we stop making excuses, stop justifying, stop blaming, and simply acknowledge, "I was wrong, and I don't want to be that person anymore." When that kind of mind is present, karma begins to shift. Maybe not instantly. Maybe the outer circumstances don't change right away. But inwardly, the storm is calmed. Someone once said, "It's not mistakes that destroy us. It's the absence of regret that dries up the soul." In Buddhism, regret is a form of awakening. It doesn't make you weak. It teaches you to feel pain in the right place. And because of that, it guides you toward healing. Now, can regret actually lessen the outer karmic result? The answer is yes, but not in the way of "I regret it, so I shouldn't face consequences." Instead, regret helps you meet those consequences with a completely different heart. A heart that no longer reacts in anger, no longer blames, no longer fights what is. And that shift, that attitude, is what lightens the burden of karma. In many Buddhist texts, the Buddha often emphasized, for the same karmic result, An ignorant person suffers 10 times more, while the wise suffer only a small portion. It's like a wound. Someone who cares for it gently will heal faster than someone who keeps scratching it and making it worse. When you feel regret and meet it with mindfulness, the karma may still unfold. But instead of rage, instead of demanding justice or trying to escape, you sit down quietly and say, "This is a lesson I'm meant to learn, and I'm ready to learn it with a softened heart." That's when karma stops being a prison and starts becoming a path of liberation that begins with regret. There was once a Buddhist layperson who came to a Zen center in California. He was battling depression after a car accident that injured another person. The law didn't hold him responsible, but he couldn't forgive himself. He couldn't sleep at night. Many people told him, "Just forget it, move on," or "Stop beating yourself up." But the Zen teacher there said something entirely different. Let your regret live with you as a friend. Don't push it away. Don't bury it, but don't let it drown you either. Let it teach you how to live differently. From that moment, the man started living differently. He became more thoughtful in every action, kinder with his words. He volunteered at hospitals. He practiced listening. He wasn't the same man anymore. He didn't transform because of the law. He didn't change because someone forgave him. He changed because he walked the deepest cleansing path of all, regret and mindfulness. So if there's something in your past that still weighs on your heart, don't rush to cover it up with temporary pleasure. Let it stay. Let it stay in a safe space within you. And from there, let it guide you to live more deeply, more gently, and more purely. Because, as the Buddha taught in the Dhammapada, no scent can travel against the wind except for the fragrance of virtue. A person who once did wrong but has chosen to make it right becomes a person of virtue. And that kind of person doesn't need to speak loudly. Their life gives off a quiet fragrance, one that lingers in the hearts of others, long after they've gone. 5. False peace. There's something strange about modern life. People chase peace like it's a product to buy, a destination to reach, or a mood to achieve. They try everything: meditation apps, soothing music, aromatherapy, spiritual retreats, weekend mindfulness workshops. You type inner peace on the internet, and millions of guides pop up, promising to help you feel calm. But why is it that some people do all of that and still feel restless? Why can someone sit still for an hour, yet be silently tormented inside? And sometimes, the more we try to feel peaceful, the more anxious we become. The answer lies deep within, because there are unresolved things inside us we haven't acknowledged, mistakes we haven't admitted, feelings we've pushed away. Many people think peace is just a feeling of relaxation, but in Buddhist teachings, peace is never about feeling good. Peace is clarity. It's the stillness that comes when the heart is no longer shaken by what's wrong, when we stop running away from ourselves. And the condition for that kind of peace isn't incense or long hours of sitting or temple visits. It's the courage to look inward, to face the mistakes we've made, even the tiny ones no one else sees. In the 42-chapter sutra, the Buddha said, "A wise person sees their faults like ink on a white robe. A foolish one sees their faults like darkness at noon, completely unaware." What he meant was clear. The wise don't need others to point out their flaws. They see them on their own. And the more they see, the more humble they become. They fear creating bad karma. They don't dismiss small misdeeds. But the ignorant, they only notice others' mistakes. And when it comes to their own, they rush to cover up, deny, or blame circumstances. That's why sometimes what looks like peace from the outside is really just a false calm. There are people who meditate for hours but never look at the harm they've caused. There are those who chant scriptures daily, yet avoid facing their lies, pride, or selfishness hidden beneath what seems like spiritual behavior. That avoidance creates a shell of stillness, not true peace. Real peace never comes from denial. It comes in a deeply honest moment when someone can say, "I was wrong here. I missed something there, and I'm willing to look at it without excuses." There's an old story. A young meditation student once came to his teacher and said, "Master, I've been practicing for 3 years, but I still don't feel at peace. I don't understand why." The master smiled gently and asked, "Have you truly looked at your own mistakes?" The student replied, "I've tried to live well. I avoid doing bad things." The master shook his head. "Living well doesn't mean you don't have faults. Some faults are subtle, like looking down on others, feeling secretly proud when praised, or avoiding feedback when criticized. Have you seen those in yourself?" The student fell silent. Then the master added, "If you've never sat alone in the dark and watched those parts of yourself arise, then the peace you think you have is just a thin mask, ready to crack." And that was the lesson. True peace only begins when we take off the mask. In today's world, there's a rising trend of quick healing, instant peace, emotional detox in a day. But the path of inner growth isn't a shortcut. There's no hack to reach real stillness if we don't pass through honest self-reflection. Some people are excellent at listening to others, smooth in communication, but they refuse to hear one sincere critique about themselves. Some speak of letting go, but what they're really letting go of is responsibility for their own wrongs. That's not practice. That's spiritual avoidance, dressed in sacred language. And that's why the deeper some people go into practice, the more unsettled they feel, if they're not also going deeper into their own flaws. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha once said, "If the heart is still impure, even if one sits beneath sacred trees, bathes in holy rivers, eats pure food, there can be no true peace." That's a wake-up call for anyone on the path who's avoiding self-honesty. Peace doesn't come from where you sit. Peace doesn't come from silence around you. Peace comes from the light within when you're brave enough to shine it on yourself. I once met a laywoman who told me, "Whenever I listen to Dharma talks, I feel lighter. But a few days later, I'm angry again, stressed, unsettled. I don't know what I'm doing wrong." After talking more, I learned she once hurt a family member with harsh words. But because of pride, she never brought it up, never apologized. And every time it came to mind, she'd push it away. "It's over. No point in digging it up." That was the block to her peace. Because an unseen mistake doesn't disappear. It lingers like a quiet wound. And any calmness you create on the outside is temporary. True peace only begins when you dare to look directly at the soreness inside. Sometimes, all it takes is an apology. Sometimes, just bowing to your past. And sometimes, a single quiet night, sitting with your thoughts, whispering to yourself, "I was wrong. That wasn't who I want to be." No one needs to judge you. You don't have to confess it aloud. But if you can see it, that's enough to begin healing. That is what the Buddha called pure Dharma vision, the eye of truth in a practitioner. So, whether you're deeply on the spiritual path or simply someone seeking solid inner ground, don't trust any peace that hasn't passed through the pain of seeing your flaws. Don't paint over calmness when the heart still holds shadows. And don't be afraid of seeing your own mistakes. It's not shameful. Seeing your flaws is the first light of wisdom. It's the beginning of living truly without pretending, without hiding. 6. the one who doesn't regret, is truly dangerous. There's a kind of person that doesn't scare you because they've done something wrong, but because they never think they're wrong. They don't feel remorse. They don't apologize even after hurting someone. They walk through life confidently, even proudly, wearing their emotional coldness like a badge of honor. That is truly frightening. In Buddhism, some mistakes are like dust on a mirror. As long as you can still see the dust, as long as you feel even a little sad about it, you can still wipe it clean. The mirror can shine again. But if you don't even see the dust, then that mirror will only grow dimmer. And one day, that person won't even recognize who they've become. They won't know what's light and what's darkness inside their own heart. There's a powerful line in the Buddha's teachings. One who makes a mistake but sees it is close to the wise. One who makes a mistake but sees nothing is far from the light. When someone no longer feels regret, only two things could be true. Either they've become so hardened they can't tell right from wrong anymore, or they're too ignorant to even recognize the damage they've caused. Whether it's cruelty or blindness, both are equally dangerous. Why? Because a person who doesn't feel remorse also doesn't know when to stop. They can hurt others without ever questioning it. They can create suffering and never once look back. And people like that, no matter where they go, no matter who they're with, will leave behind scars on others and on themselves. There's a story from the Buddha's time that shows this clearly. A wealthy, powerful man once struck a beggar in anger just because he was annoyed. When others advised him to apologize, he scoffed. "Someone like me apologize to someone like that?" And he walked away, completely unmoved. But just days later, he lost everything in a political fallout. His wealth, his power gone. The people who once bowed to him disappeared. And the first person to offer him a bowl of rice? That same beggar. He broke down and cried, finally recognizing his own arrogance. The Buddha said, "Late regret is still a blessing, but no regret at all, even in wealth and luxury, is the sign of a dried-up heart." The truth is, no one is perfect. We've all been careless at times, all made mistakes. But morality isn't measured by what we've done in the past. It's measured by whether we're willing to face it now. Are we brave enough to admit we caused harm? Or do we keep making excuses, hiding behind pride, or blaming others? There are people who spend years complaining their families don't love them, without ever realizing that their own anger, harsh words, or selfishness may be part of the reason. But because they never look at their side of things, they go from one disappointment to another, convinced, "No one understands me," when in reality, they never tried to understand anyone. And a person who can't feel regret can't grow. Without change, there's no maturity. And without maturity, the heart stays small, selfish, rigid. Regret is where transformation begins. It doesn't make us weak. It makes us more human. Many people have wept over past moments when they were harsh with their parents, cruel to someone they loved, or betrayed a friend for something fleeting. Those tears, if they come from a heart that's awake, are the purest offering the soul can make. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "If one sees their fault, admits it, and corrects it, the fault is like a passing cloud or dust that falls away. But hiding a fault turns it into a deep pit, a dark abyss." But how can we admit our faults if we don't even feel remorse? That's why the person who never regrets is truly dangerous, not just to others but to themselves, because they'll keep hurting people. They'll keep planting karmic seeds of harm. They'll keep walking in darkness, believing they're on the right path. We see this in society too. People commit crimes, cause damage, but still justify, still blame. Why? Because they've lost the most basic human ability to know when they're wrong. And often, the scariest thing isn't the action itself. It's the numbness of the mind behind it. When the heart no longer trembles over the harm it causes, cruelty can wear a mask of logic. Harshness can be dressed up in clever words. Coldness can hide behind power or success. But inside is a silence that should worry us. In Buddhism, this is called moral blindness, a spiritual numbness. And yet, the moment someone turns back even just once, regret can shift the whole flow of their karma. Because in that moment, they start to live differently. They begin to love more deeply. They start to respect the law of cause and effect. So please, don't be afraid of someone who's made mistakes. Be afraid of the one who never admits them. Don't fear someone who breaks down and cries because they're sorry. Fear the one who's always confident, always loud, and never questions the harm their words or actions might cause. Because someone who regrets may hurt another once, but someone who doesn't will hurt people again and again without ever realizing it. Now, maybe a quiet question is rising in your heart. What if I've been that person? What if I've been numb, unaware, unkind, without seeing it? Is it too late to turn back? The answer is, it's never too late. As long as there's a flicker of light in your heart. Even someone like Angulimala, the man who once killed nearly 100 people, turned around. He became a revered monk in the Buddhist community. Because he saw his fault, he felt deep remorse, and he walked a different path. Real regret, if it's true, is always a doorway. It's the beginning of a better life. It's proof that your Buddha nature is still alive. Because if your heart can soften at your own wrongdoing, then everything good is still possible. 7. Every regret is a noble seed. Sometimes in life, it's not what others did to us that makes our hearts sink. It's what we did, the words we said without thinking, the moment we lost our patience, the one time we looked away instead of showing kindness. And later, in a moment of stillness, a quiet sigh rises from deep inside. I shouldn't have done that. That's the sound of true regret. And if we're mindful enough not to push it away, that very moment becomes sacred because a seed of morality is being planted right there in the soil of our heart. A wholesome seed has just been born. Sure, maybe we're not perfect. Maybe we still carry old wounds. But if we still know how to regret, then it's never too late to begin again. People often think regret is a negative feeling, but in the light of Buddhist wisdom, it's actually a profound path of transformation. Not because it makes us suffer, but because it wakes us up. Not because it makes us weak, but because it stops us from sliding further down the wrong path. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, just as a gatekeeper carefully shuts the city gate, a mindful person knows when to stop before crossing a moral line. Regret, when it's deep and real, is like a gate closing just in time. Each time it happens, an unwholesome karma is halted. A harmful habit doesn't continue. A wrong path is left behind before it leads too far. Think of the mind like a garden. Every thought is a seed. When we act out of carelessness or say something unkind, we drop a toxic seed into that garden. But when we reflect on it and truly feel regret, it's like we go back, pick that seed up, and bury it deeper so it doesn't sprout. Instead of bitterness, something else starts to grow. Awareness. One moment of true regret is like watering the roots of our moral character. Imagine someone who once told a lie, and then, saw how deeply it hurts someone. If they regret it deeply, honestly, then the next time they're tempted to speak, they'll pause. That pause is the seed of wisdom. And in each of those pauses, they're quietly rebuilding themselves, not with bricks, but with mindfulness. Sometimes, growth isn't about learning something new. It's about finally feeling sorry for something old. There's a story from the Buddhist time about a young monk named Sudina. One day, he secretly took a valuable statue from the monastery to give to his aging mother, hoping it would comfort her. When the monks discovered this, Sudina fell to his knees, crying. "I didn't do it out of greed," he sobbed. "I just didn't want my mother to feel alone." The Buddha didn't scold him. He simply looked at the young monk with compassion and said, "Sudina, you have made a mistake, but your tears today will water the field of your future virtue." And they did. From that day on, Sudina became one of the strictest monks in the Sangha, always reminding his fellow monks to uphold integrity and live truthfully. Sometimes, it's our failures, the very moments we hurt someone, that become turning points in our lives. If we can face them honestly, if we let ourselves truly regret. It's not always the person who's never made mistakes that we should admire, but the one who has and refuses to repeat them. That's the beginning of spiritual practice. And that path begins with one humble step: regret. You don't need to be a monk or a nun to walk this path. Anyone right here, right now, can start by simply looking at themselves and saying, "I was wrong." Because only by seeing what's not right can we begin to know what is. Only by feeling the pain we've caused do we begin to understand compassion. Only by remembering how we've once acted out of ignorance do we find the desire to live with more kindness. If you pay attention, you'll notice something about truly moral people. They're often the ones who question themselves the most. They don't wait for others to point out their mistakes. They already see them. And because of that, they don't need to be punished. Their own heart already feels it. That quiet pain, invisible to others, slowly sharpens their character. But someone who never regrets, even if they read all the books on ethics, even if they preach beautiful words from a stage, might only know how to talk about virtue, not how to live it. Genuine remorse is a sign of a heart that's waking up. And what's beautiful is, every time it happens, another layer of our inner life opens up. Something deep and still and sacred begins to grow. That's morality. It's not loud. It doesn't need applause. But it becomes unshakable over time. Like a bamboo stalk, the taller it grows, the more it bows. The more ethical a person becomes, the less they talk about morality. But their presence speaks volumes in their walk, their gaze, their silence. And when that noble seed is planted again and again through each honest regret, negative karma begins to fade. Just like an old path disappears when no one walks it anymore, karmic cycles dissolve when we stop repeating the causes. The Buddha once taught, "As drops of water slowly fill a jar, so does a heart filled with true remorse gradually become full of goodness." We don't have to feel regret all the time. But when we do, let it be real. Let it be honest. Let it lead us to ask the right questions. Why did I say that? Why didn't I stay when they needed me? Why did I turn away when I could have shown love? These questions, if they come from a sincere heart, won't just help us fix today's mistakes. They'll teach us how to live better tomorrow. Not to become perfect, but to become someone who doesn't keep making the same mistakes. And from there, regret becomes a noble seed, one that quietly nourishes our character, like underground springs feeding trees in a silent forest. You don't need anyone to see it, but everyone who walks by will feel it, the gentle fragrance of a kind heart. So if you're feeling regret right now, don't rush to bury it under positive thinking or comforting words. Stay with it. Sit with it. Listen to your heart. Because maybe, just maybe, that's not sadness you're feeling. Maybe it's the deepest part of your spirit, quietly inviting you to become the person you were always meant to be. 8. True compassion can spark remorse in even the cruelest hearts. Have you ever wondered what truly makes a person turn away from wrongdoing? It's not scolding, not punishment, not fear of hell or karma. What truly transforms someone is something much softer yet far more powerful than force. Genuine compassion. This kind of compassion isn't pity. It doesn't come from a place of superiority or moral pride. It's not driven by an arrogant need to fix someone. It's simply the ability to see beyond a person's harmful actions and believe, even in their darkest moments, that there's still a flicker of light in them. There's a famous story in the Buddhist tradition about a meditation master and a feared outlaw named Angulimala. Angulimala was a notorious killer, said to have murdered nearly 100 people as part of a twisted ritual. Everyone feared him. Villages locked their doors at the mention of his name, and most people agreed he needed to be destroyed. But not the Buddha. Instead of avoiding or condemning him, the Buddha walked straight into the forest where Angulimala was hiding. When the killer saw a monk in a saffron robe calmly walking toward him, he thought, easy target. He ran after him, intending to kill. But no matter how fast Angulimala ran, he couldn't catch up. Even though the Buddha was walking slowly, peacefully, it was as if the outlaw could never reach him. Finally, out of breath, Angulimala shouted, "Monk, stop!" And the Buddha turned gently and replied, "I've already stopped, Angulimala. It's you who hasn't stopped." That one sentence pierced right through his heart. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever looked at him not as a monster, but as a human being capable of waking up. Something inside him cracked open, and for the first time, a tear of remorse began to form in his eyes. He dropped his weapon, he fell to his knees, and he asked to become a monk. Later, he would go on to become one of the most disciplined and sincere monks in the Sangha, praised by the Buddha as someone who made a profound transformation from evil to goodness. This isn't just a legend. It's a living example of one simple truth. True compassion can awaken a person's conscience even in the darkest corners of their soul. Some people stay stuck in harmful patterns, not because they're evil, but because they've never been seen with eyes that didn't judge. Some only act cruelly because no one ever believed they were capable of kindness. And if no one believes in you, it's hard to believe in yourself. But just once, if someone treats them with genuine, unconditional kindness, not because they deserve it, but simply because they're still human, something begins to shift. A tiny seed of remorse is planted. There was once an old woman who came to a meditation center with a heavy heart. She told me about her son, who had been addicted to drugs, had stolen from the family, and had brought her shame in the eyes of the neighbors. She had shouted at him, thrown him out, told him she never wanted to see him again. But one rainy night, she saw him outside the house, cold and drenched. Without a word, she opened the door, handed him a towel, and placed a warm bowl of rice in front of him. She said, "He didn't say anything. He just sat and ate quietly. And when he finished, he turned to me and cried like a child." That moment, not any rehab center or tough love tactic sparked his change. Not because he was threatened, but because he was loved without judgment. In Buddhism, that kind of compassion is called Metta, one of the four immeasurables. Loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. True loving kindness doesn't wait for someone to earn it. It doesn't say, "I'll be kind if you behave." It says, "I'll be kind because you're hurting." Because often, those who hurt others are the ones who are hurting most. A wise person doesn't fear the cruel. They care for them the way you'd care for a lost child wandering in darkness, because they know if just one light can be lit in that heart, the whole world becomes a little less heavy. Like the Zen master who once found a thief breaking into his room late at night. Instead of panicking, he said calmly, "There's some tea on the table. If you're cold, there's a blanket by the door." The thief was stunned. For the first time in his life, he wasn't called a criminal. He wasn't shouted at or shamed. He was simply offered kindness. They say after that night, the man gave up stealing. No lectures, no punishments, just one quiet gesture of humanity. That is the silent power of true compassion. It doesn't scream. It doesn't preach. It just shows up without judgment, without ego, and says, "I still believe there's goodness in you. I don't know when you'll see it, but I won't stop believing." That quiet belief, that faith in someone's goodness is what makes them feel shame, not from humiliation, but from being treated too kindly to continue living poorly. And that's when real remorse is born. Not the forced kind, but the kind that rises from a soul that has just been seen. In families, in marriages, between siblings and friends. If we could offer that kind of belief in each other, how many people would have chosen healing instead of hiding? Growth instead of revenge? Light instead of darkness? Sometimes, all it takes is one look that says, "You may be lost right now, but you are still worthy of love." Because true compassion doesn't make someone feel better than. It makes them want to be better. That's something every spiritual seeker should understand. We don't practice only for ourselves. We practice to plant seeds of goodness in others. We don't always need to lecture people. Sometimes, just being sincerely kind, patient, and open-hearted is more than enough. They may walk away. They may pretend not to care. But deep down, the seed of remorse has already been planted. And sooner or later, they'll turn around. So if someone has hurt you, if someone has made terrible mistakes, and you're strong enough to not respond with punishment, choose kindness, not because they deserve it, but because you are too beautiful to make the world uglier. Who knows, maybe your quiet compassion is the very path that will lead them back. Just like Angulimala, just like the thief on a cold night, just like the son eating his mother's rice in tears. And just maybe that's what the Buddha meant when he showed us that true power is love without judgment. 9. Remorse is a mirror that reflects our inner ethics. Someone once asked me, "Why feel remorse? Isn't life about moving forward?" At first glance, that sounds modern, even positive. But if you sit with that question long enough, you'll notice behind it is often a deep form of avoidance. Because only those brave enough to look back at themselves are the ones truly ready to move forward in a mature way. In Buddhist wisdom, remorse isn't about beating yourself up. It's not meant to drag you down into guilt or shame or make you retreat from life. No, remorse is a kind of wisdom. It's that moment when a light shines directly on something we did in the past, and we clearly see, I had taken a wrong turn. It's like a mirror, but not the kind you use to check your appearance. It's a mirror that reflects your mind, your character, your way of living. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "One who feels shame and remorse is protected by the Dharma." That means the one who can recognize their mistakes still has inner boundaries, still has the strength to step back from harmful choices, still has a chance to make things right. No mirror in the world can show us our wrongs, like the mirror of sincere remorse within, because it's only when remorse arises that we stop. Only when we stop that we can see. And only when we truly see that we can change. There's an old Buddhist story about a young student who trained under a seasoned Zen master. The boy was clever, sharp, but also quite arrogant. One day, while washing his teacher's robes, he accidentally tore a very special one, a robe the master had worn for many years. Instead of admitting the mistake, he secretly tried to stitch it back up and acted like nothing happened. That evening, the old teacher looked at him for a long while and said gently, "When someone makes a mistake but doesn't have the courage to face it, that mistake will follow them for the rest of their life." The young student said nothing, but that night, he couldn't sleep. He kept seeing the torn fabric, his own hurried hands, and his teacher's silent gaze. The next morning, he knelt and apologized, and the master simply smiled. "You've found the mirror you need. Remorse is that mirror, not to drown in guilt, but to check whether our actions are aligned with truth, to ask ourselves, did that behavior reflect kindness? Was it honest? Was it humble? Or was it the opposite?" Because in Buddhism, truth isn't just something to memorize. It's a standard we quietly hold inside, to reflect on every choice, every thought, every step. In daily life, people often repeat the same mistakes, not because they're evil, but because they have nothing to reflect with. No one gives feedback. No one guides them. And there's no stillness deep enough for honest self-reflection. So the same mistake gets repeated, again and again, until one day life hits back. Something painful happens. Someone walks away. A relationship falls apart. And in that silence, if the heart is awake, a quiet voice may rise. Maybe it was me. That voice is remorse beginning to show us the truth. Some people ask, "But how can I live if I'm always feeling remorse?" The answer is simple. Only those who can feel remorse are capable of living rightly. No one goes through life without making mistakes, but the difference is this: the one with ethics turns around. The one stuck in ignorance keeps going, even while walking deeper into darkness. In the light of Buddhist wisdom, every moment of remorse isn't a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. An elderly monk once said, "We can't live without making mistakes, but we can live in a way where every mistake becomes a step in our practice." Because a mistake, if not illuminated by remorse, stays heavy. But once seen clearly with mindfulness, it becomes a stepping stone toward wisdom. As the old saying goes, where you trip, bend down, and pick up a stone of truth. True remorse never weakens a person. On the contrary, it makes them softer and stronger. Softer because they learn to bow their heads. Stronger because it takes courage to admit when we're wrong. And bowing before truth is never cowardice. It's something only the ethical heart can do. There was once a man who came to a monastery asking to ordain. He said that in the past, he had cheated on his wife, neglected his children, chased after pleasures, and left behind the people who loved him most. But his voice carried no excuses. No blaming, just truth spoken with eyes full of responsibility. The abbot looked at him and asked, "Do you want to become a monk, to run away from your mistakes, or to face them?" The man replied, "I want to face them every single day, until I no longer see myself as the person who caused that harm." And the teacher accepted him. That kind of remorse is the first step to freedom, because when we truly recognize our wrongs and hold them next to what's right, what's kind, what's good, there's a deep sadness that arises. But within that sadness, a longing is born, a longing to live rightly, to be kind, to be better than we were. And that is the beginning of morality. So, if there's something in your past, a word, an action, a moment that still feels heavy inside, don't rush to silence it. Let remorse speak. Let that mirror reflect. Because maybe in that one quiet reflection, you'll see your real self. Not the version shaped by pride or excuses, but the honest human being who once caused pain and now wants to heal it. And don't be afraid that remorse will make you weak. The real weakness is doing wrong and still thinking you're right. But when you feel remorse, you're no longer at rock bottom. You're already standing at the doorway to light. So if you can, even just for a moment, pause and look back at a word that hurt someone, at a careless moment that lost something precious, at a stubbornness that made someone cry. Let your heart become still like a quiet pond, and let the mirror of remorse reflect that image again. Because who knows? That might just be the beginning of a more honest, more loving, and more mindful way of living. 10. The beautiful sadness of remorse. Some tears may be salty, but they wash away the dust of life. Some wounds, though unforgettable, can humble a person, soften their heart, and give depth to their soul. In the journey of healing or spiritual practice, few things are as precious as true remorse. Not the kind that comes from getting caught, not the kind that mourns something lost beyond reach, but the kind that arises from a deep awakening. The moment you see clearly, my heart once wandered, and it was me who caused that pain. That realization hurts. And yet, strangely, it's a beautiful kind of pain. The Buddha never encouraged self-punishment, but he did teach that remorse is one of the conditions for purifying past karma. Because when a person genuinely sees their wrongs, that very seeing begins to dissolve the harm within. It's like a gentle stream, flowing through parched, hardened earth, not instantly turning everything green again, but quietly beginning the return to freshness. There's an old story about a king who had waged many violent wars in his youth. Later in life, he fell gravely ill, and no healer could save him. So his ministers brought a revered Zen monk to the palace, hoping for blessings. But the monk didn't chant. He didn't perform any ritual. He simply stood in front of the king and softly said, "Your Majesty, allow yourself to feel remorse." The king froze. All those years armored in ego, commanding soldiers, building temples, and never once had he paused to look within. And now, just one quiet sentence, like a whisper, brought tears to his eyes. Not because the words were cruel, but because they awakened something long forgotten, a sense of shame. And in that moment, his first true sadness arose. Not a sadness that drowns, but a sadness that melts a hardened heart. In Buddhism, remorse like that is called a purifying drop of water that cleanses the hidden stains of the mind. These stains aren't always visible. They're subtle, like dust. A word spoken carelessly that wounded someone, a look of contempt, a selfish choice when someone needed help, a silence that stood by when you should have spoken up. They seem small, but when illuminated by the light of remorse, we suddenly see they left scars on our own hearts, and we realize we were never as good as we thought we were. But that very moment when we see our own wrongs is the most beautiful moment in our inner life, because that's when the heart becomes real, no longer trying to seem strong or flawless or right, but finally learning to bow down in the most human, most sacred way. And if that remorse isn't silenced too quickly, it sprouts into compassion. Not compassion from theory, not from books or lectures, but from real lived experience. I once caused pain, and now I never want anyone to hurt like that again. There was once a middle-aged woman who came to a monastery, asking to stay and volunteer. She didn't want to ordain, didn't ask for teachings or wisdom, She just wanted to sweep the grounds, cook meals, wash robes for the monks. She worked quietly, didn't speak much, but there was always a soft sadness in her face. One day, a young nun asked gently, "Ma'am, what is it that makes your heart so heavy?" The woman shared, "Years ago, I was so obsessed with money that I left my sick mother alone in our village. I didn't care for her, and by the time she passed, I realized I had abandoned the one thing that mattered most in my life." Then she said something no one forgot. "I'm not here looking for forgiveness. I just want to live each day a little lighter, as if I'm washing away one stain from my heart at a time." And in that moment, the whole monastery fell silent. That is the beautiful sadness of a heart that knows remorse. Not dramatic, not tragic, just a warm, quiet ache. One that makes us live slower, gentler, and more mindful. People often ask, but what's the point of regret? Can it change the past? Number. It can't. But remorse can change the future. Because once a heart truly feels remorse, that person will never be the same. They won't repeat the same mistakes. They'll move more carefully. They'll care more deeply. And they'll honor what's right, like someone treasuring a light in the dark. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "Everyone makes mistakes, but the one who sees their wrongs and corrects them, they light up their life like the moon emerging from behind clouds." Remorse is not weakness. It's a sign of inner strength, because only those strong enough can bear to look back at themselves. Only those with ethics feel pain when they know they've done harm, and only hearts filled with compassion ache when they realize they've caused someone else to suffer. So if there's a quiet sadness in you, don't rush to push it away. Maybe that sadness didn't come to break you. Maybe it came to save you. Like a drop of water falling into a dry heart, calling back the stream that once flowed there. And maybe, just maybe, that one drop of remorse today is the first drop of a life lived in real integrity. 11. You can't wash away karma with theory. There's a subtle trap on the spiritual path. It's when someone thinks that just because they understand a few Buddhist teachings or can talk about deep-sounding concepts, they're enlightened. But here's the truth. If your heart has never truly felt remorse, if you've never winced in pain over something wrong you did, then no matter how often you chant purity of mind, there's still a lot inside that hasn't been purified. Buddhist teachings aren't magical incantations to help us avoid the truth. And purity of mind isn't a curtain to cover up the unwholesome things we haven't dared to face. The Buddha once said, "You can't cleanse a dirty body just by bathing in perfume." Likewise, you can't call a heart pure if it's still dodging the truth. A person who uses spiritual concepts to justify their own wrongs, that's not practice. That's ego in disguise. Someone once said to me, "I believe in the Dharma. I know everything's impermanent, that sin and merit are just labels, so I don't need to feel regret. As long as I keep my mind calm, that's enough." Sounds zen, doesn't it? But look closer, something doesn't feel right. Because true calm, true purity of mind only appears after we've walked through the fire of real remorse. After we've looked directly at our wrongs, without turning away. It's not a state we build with theory. It's something that naturally arises when the heart has been washed clean with truth. There's an old story from the sutras. A disciple asked his teacher, "Master, if everything is emptiness, do I still need to repent?" The teacher looked him straight in the eye and said, "The fact that you're asking means you haven't seen true emptiness." Because the emptiness he spoke of was just intellectual. Something in the head, But the emptiness in Buddhism is something you feel from the depth of humility, from a heart that's bent in regret, from someone who has bowed down before their own wrongs. Now, it's easy to understand someone who does wrong and doesn't admit it. But someone who does wrong and then covers it with spiritual reasoning, that's far more dangerous, because they end up fooling themselves. They think they're practicing, but really, they're just using Dharma as a shield for the ego. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha taught, there are three kinds of people. The one who sees their faults, feels shame, and corrects them, that person is noble. The one who sees no fault and feels no shame, that person is foolish. But the one who sees the fault and still tries to justify it, that one plants the seeds of future suffering. No teaching in the world can substitute honest self-reflection. There was once a woman who came to the monastery completely overwhelmed. She cried and said, "I've hurt my daughter for many years, but every time guilt came up, I would tell myself, it's all karma, she's just repaying her past." Then she fell silent and added quietly, "But the more I said that, the less I could sleep. The more I chanted sutras, the more restless I felt." She didn't realize that restlessness was actually a good sign. It meant she still had a conscience. And only when she finally stopped using theory to cover the truth, only when she admitted her wrongs, could she start to sleep again. The heart can't be calm when it's avoiding the truth. Someone once asked, "But then, what's the point of chanting, meditating, or studying teachings?" They're incredibly helpful, but only as tools, not as replacements. If you chant sutras just to forget your wrongs, it's like spraying perfume over a wound that's never been cleaned. If you meditate just to stop thinking about it, you're basically covering a garbage pile with fresh grass. Remorse doesn't have to be broadcast to the world, but it must be real on the inside. Only then will any practice, whether it's chanting or meditation, actually work. A Zen master once said something that cuts deep. A true practitioner isn't the one who talks endlessly about the Dharma. It's the one who quietly weeps alone, remembering their past mistakes. That weeping isn't suffering. It's the healing water that rinses away karmic dust, stuck to the soul for lifetimes. These days, it's so easy to fall into knowing too much. We watch Dharma talks. We read endless books. But if it's not grounded in truth, then all that knowledge is just information, not wisdom. Wisdom starts with truth. And the first truth we must face is our own wrongdoing. You don't have to say it out loud. Just look at it honestly. Don't avoid it. There's no shortcut to a clean heart. Only one road leads there. The road through courageous self-honesty and genuine remorse. Only after that do spiritual practices truly lead to purity. Without it, everything else is just fresh paint on a cracked wall. You can fool others with a calm face, but you can't fool karma, and you can't fool your own heart, because the heart knows. The heart remembers, and it feels even when your mind tries to deny it. So if there's something heavy inside you, don't rush to chant. Face it, own it, regret it deeply, and only then start practicing for real. When the Buddha was still alive, a man who had killed others came to him, asking to become a monk. The disciples were shocked. They protested, but the Buddha said yes. He explained, someone who once did great wrong, if they feel true remorse, their heart can become purer than someone who's never made a mistake but walks with pride. That one sentence has been a light for countless people lost in guilt. Because if your remorse is real, there is no karma that cannot be cleansed. All it takes is one honest moment of looking back. One moment of stopping, with no excuses. One moment of quietly saying, I was wrong. And in that moment, a door opens. The door to integrity. The door to true practice. You don't need fancy theories, just a sincere heart. And when you have that, when you can see you're wrong without flinching, you'll understand why the Buddha said, remorse must come first if you want to cleanse the mind, because no one has ever purified their karma by pretending they didn't have any. But once you feel true remorse, no pretending, no hiding, you'll discover something beautiful. Your heart begins to soften. No more struggling to protect your ego. No more fear of facing the truth. Just a quiet lightness, like putting down a heavy load you've carried for far too long. And that's when the real journey begins. No more reciting empty theory. Now it's a way of life. A life lit by truth and shaded by humility. The Buddha never rejected anyone who felt true regret. In his eyes, a person who has fallen and turned around is more precious than one who looks perfect but lacks sincerity. Because true remorse doesn't just clean past karma. It's the first step to a whole new life. A life of integrity, of compassion, and of clear direction. So, if something in this message touched your heart, don't rush away. Give yourself a little quiet time to reflect, to look deeply, and if there's anything you need to own up to, start today. Thank you for being here and listening. If this video meant something to you, please like it, share it with someone who needs a gentle light in their life. And don't forget to subscribe to the Buddhism Seeds channel, where we walk this path together with mindfulness, clarity, and the healing wisdom of the Buddha. If there's something on your heart or a question about Dharma, please drop it in the comments. We're always here to listen. See you in the next video.